episode is a mission to dive deeper into the topic of cyber law, the different types of cyber risks out there, and the strategies that companies should implement to protect their data. This week, I'm speaking to Emma Wise, who is a Senior Legal Officer at the Royal Australian Air Force. Make sure you subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel to catch it all. So we are all very interested how you became immersed in this world of military law and cyber law.
It was a little bit random. I'd put myself through law school in a sense. I lived at home, but I was working part-time jobs. And this Army Reserve thing was available at the time where you'd work in the reserve for a year and then they'd help pay for the rest of your degree. And my dad, who was a career Army officer, I ran this notion past him and he said, "Nope, I absolutely forbid you from joining the Army." So I canned that and kept, doing these part-time jobs, finished my law degree and actually went into the public service for 3 years, doing personal injury and also a bit of occupational health and safety legislation-y stuff. And that was in Canberra, and every day I'd walk past the recruiting office on the way to work and on the way home. And eventually there was maybe 3 years in the public service there, the Commonwealth Public Service. I just went, I think I'll go in. And that's how maybe 3 months later, not even, it was very, very quick. I found myself at boot camp wearing camouflage and holding a weapon and going, what just happened? What just happened? Because my dad and a lot of Army people can be quite cruel about the Air Force. They'll call it public service in uniform, And he said, "Oh, you won't have boot camp. It'll be a knife and fork course." And I thought, "Oh, yes, well, I could do that." It wasn't. We had to march and we had to dig weapon pits and we had to put up barbed wire fences and stay awake all night on pretend picket with pretend enemy, and I hated it. I just had no idea what I got into. But I have this sort of grit and determination that I'm not going to quit. So 21 years later, so I don't know if I had any concept of what I was getting into. And the military do this clever thing where they move you every 2 to 3 years. And part of it's to get you into the mentality that you can deploy and it won't be such a huge uplift. But it's also like having a new job. Every 2 to 3 years, you've got a new set of friends, you've got a new supervisor. No matter how bad one position is, you'll find another. You get to explore Australia or overseas. So it does have this allure that I think kept me in probably longer than I might have been if I'd gone somewhere else. Yeah, so that's how I got into the military. Yeah, I reached a kind of decision point in 2010. I'd completed this thing called Staff College. They give you a year to study, which is awesome, and that's in Canberra. And then I had a choice to kind of go after, I suppose, a corporate-y, like a head office role, which would lead to probably better pay and promotion, or there was this position coming up in the cyber squadron in the Air Force, and I hadn't really got to use my computer skills since I'd finished my science degree a long time earlier, and it interested me. It was, I think I went for passion over pay, and really glad I did. Yeah, so that's where I get into the cyber stuff.
Now, we were speaking before and you mentioned that you've been deployed to war 2 times. Tell us about that experience and how, as a lawyer, you obviously help the government.
Yeah, so one of the first questions a lot of people have is, why do we have lawyers in uniform? Don't you just do wills and spills? And there was a time in the military where lawyers very much we might represent soldiers who'd been charged or do people's wills, and there's still a role to do people's wills. In fact, they're always free for military people because we put people in harm's way. But in tightening of budgets and things, to justify the cost of having a lawyer in uniform, it was really about our operational aspect. And from the 90s, and certainly the late 90s, we went to Timor, and I suppose the Defence Force entered a new era of operational tempo. And so the lawyers needed to be very up to speed in the Geneva Conventions and Hague Protocols and all the associated things, which in a nutshell we call the laws of armed conflict, aka international humanitarian law. So for me, I got all these different postings, and I had 4 years. I was really fortunate to be with the Maritime Patrol Group in Adelaide, and they're the aircraft that do surveillance and reconnaissance, and they also had a very big role in, I suppose, if you like, the Gulf War, our commitment to the Middle East. And so for our first deployment, in addition to the excitement of going through the gas chamber, because they test your gas mask and how things fit and whether you can hold your weapon with their ridiculously big black rubber gloves and all these things, because they were nervous about chemical and biological warfare. So amongst all those fun drills, I was drafting the rules of engagement for the maritime aircraft. And yes, that involves, I suppose, the mix of diplomatic, political and operational. And then I went with them, so it's kind of put your money where your mouth is. The rules that we had are the ones that we went over with. They actually hired a charter aircraft to take us over, and you don't know what to expect. I don't say it was anything like World War I or World War II, what to expect. We were fairly certain there'd be maybe demountables or tents that we'd be sleeping in, but yeah, you didn't really know what it was going to be like. When you landed, you had the kit that they provide you with, you know, your uniform, the gas mask, the suit, weapon, the ammunition's kept separate. But yeah, I suppose you could say, as a typical lawyer, I'd been told, oh, don't worry, they've done a reconnaissance, everything will be set up, and I just, trust no one. So I had my own printer, my own laptop, and there's this Defence Force Discipline Act, which is the internal criminal code, I suppose, for the military. And we use the same laws of evidence as everyone. But I had a copy of that as well, because I was like, well, Australians overseas are going to get into trouble. So when we arrived, sure enough, the computers weren't set up. I had the only printer, and the officer commanding immediately took my printer from me. So, yeah.
How long were you there for?
So the first time I was only there for 3.5 months. Yeah. And then I was replaced by another lawyer, and we've had a continuous footprint there ever since.
And the second time, how long?
Second time was in 2004, and that was for just under 4 months.
4 months. So what was it like?
So for the first one, scary.
Tell us more.
I remember the charter aircraft was leaving from Adelaide, from RAF Base Edinburgh, as it was then called. It's now a joint base. And the officer commanding, who's the equivalent of a colonel rank in the army, it's called a group captain, his wife had come as well to say goodbye to him and to all of us little people, and she'd met me before, a lovely woman. And I remember just as we're about to board, and we're in our cams and whatever, and she said, how are you doing this? How are you so composed? And I said, it's my job, and it is just that mentality of, this is what I'm trying to do, I'm going to go off and do it. And honestly, it's no different to what every lawyer does. I think every lawyer, teacher and actor have a great deal in common. We put on our war paint and we go to work, and it could be in court, it may be behind a desk. It's partly the expectation of others, and lawyers in Army, Air Force and Navy are all officers, and there's an element of, not that other ranks, which are the sort of sergeants and so forth, are in any way lower than us, but that you have a duty of care. If I'm wigging out, they don't know as much as I do about all the background to the operation and why we're going. So there's an element of I want to keep my cool so that others do. But inside, it's, your guts, you're nervous, you're having a sphincter moment, you're thinking, we could land and die. We don't know what it's going to be like. we weren't going right into Iraq, so that was good. We were going into essentially the United Arab Emirates, but it was all secret at the time. We couldn't discuss anything with anyone. None of my family knew. I could just say Middle East area of operations.
So they knew you were going, but they didn't know where.
I wasn't allowed to tell them.
And when you got there, were you able to communicate or no?
So you're allowed, back then I think we were allowed a phone call. I don't think we had one for the first 2 weeks. We just weren't set up.
Yeah.
And then I think maybe once a week. We had a computer system that was internal and secure. It was a secret system, so you couldn't email that back home. But eventually they came up with a kind of recreation room which had open internet and people could use games to play with, and they could, Skype back home, and it got better. So by the second deployment, it felt like I was going into a pretty good 2-star hotel. Okay. They'd even grown some grass with wastewater, like it was so much more of a camp, more like a normal exercise, which is what the military call training for war. You go on exercise. So you'll spend a lot of time going on exercise to play war before you go. So you're very used to whatever, eating a ration pack, having little sleep, moving around. Yeah. They get you used to it.
Okay. Interesting. I'm sure so many lawyers would.
They should join the reserve. We need young, fit, intelligent, not even that young. I was 27 when I joined the Permanent Air Force. And it's really good for, I think, the law firms as well as the Defence Force to have people with that interest. So, I've lived in several states in Australia, and each one of those reserve panels, they're amazing. They're people who might be partners, there are people who are judges, and in the equivalent in the medical profession, you've got surgeons and amazingly qualified people. And I think both benefit. So the law firm, yes, loses that person for a period of time, but the experience they get on an operation, and then in turn, probably the business back. Yeah, I think everyone wins. Everyone wins.
I just don't think many lawyers know that's actually an option.
I didn't know I could have my law degree paid for. Do you know how stupid I felt? I'd worked at Woolies as a checkout chick, and I could have had my degree paid for. So, not the Army, because everyone just, I think, always thinks about joining the Army when they think military, but the Air Force and the Navy have an undergraduate scheme. You pass your first year of law, you show them your grades, they will not just pay your HECS debt, they will not just pay for your textbooks, they will not just pay for all of your everything at uni, they'll give you a salary and somewhere to live. They'll subsidise your accommodation. Like, how did I not know this?
I don't think many people do. You're not alone.
We don't advertise well.
Okay.
Anyway.
So I want to move on to cyber law.
Yeah.
Tell us about cyber law and the risks that are involved, because you would have seen a lot through the Army and your current positions.
Yeah, so there are cyber risks and cyber crime, and then I like to sort of have this invisible war, and then over here, something that I would, as a military lawyer, call cyber attack. And I separate it. You see there's wall, and then there's cyber crime, and then there's this. And the reason I'm separating it is because to get to the level where I would call it an attack is the same level I would call any armed use of force. So it's now so severe on any given state, and by that I mean country, that you would be allowed to say, oh, this is armed conflict, and now armed conflict rules apply. So one of my pet bugbears about cyber is that in the media, which I cherish deeply, the Australian media, that they'll use the word attack willy-nilly, cyber attack. It's cybercrime.
Okay.
There's been theft, there's been perhaps a little trespass or some such, not an attack, in the sense that if I am physically attacked, I have a right of self-defence. But if someone's snuck into my office and taken some physical files, they've stolen. Mm-hmm. So I like to kind of just, I will happily talk for hours about military level attack and at what point does is there a sufficient level of cyber incursion that a state, a country, can respond with force? That was my bread and butter. But I think more relevant perhaps for us in this context is getting the idea that this is crime. Mm-hmm. So people are either invading, in a sense, your home, they're invading your space, even if that's cyberspace, and they might not even steal at first. So if you can imagine someone casing your joint. So I've come into your apartment, I've had a look around while you went home, and I thought, oh, if I just leave this little wedge here in your back door, I can get in whenever I want. So whenever I need to have access to your home in the future, I've set it down. I don't need it now, but maybe I'll need it in the future. You could become famous. And so if I'm the clever little hacker, to take my analogy back to cyber, I've made a back door. It's a commodity. How many people want your back door, Louise?
I don't know.
So if I'm just someone that enjoys playing around with code or doing things like that, there's a market for just back doors, just entries into someone's world. So that's a thing in itself. There are all kinds of other things. There can be latent bits of program. There can be, there's a lot of cyber terms, and I've made a decision coming into today. I'm not going to drown you in unnecessary technology. You don't need to know the terms, but I think it really helps to understand it as crime, and all the analogies fit. So I can case your joint, I can leave little traps, I can make things very bad very quickly, and really then it becomes, if I'm a business, if I'm a law firm, what are my vulnerable points? What's my most critical vulnerability? And I was thinking about Melbourne law firms, thinking, wow, those law firms who represent some of our really high-profile, characteristic, Melbourne mafios, or whatever we want to call, a kind of underworld, an espresso drinking cool mob sort of thing. If I were in a gang, let's say, and I know law firm X represents the other gang, wow, they've represented them in all of these cases, that law firm, and they have all of this privileged information. That could really help me get a business advantage over that mob, because let's be honest, we're all about making money in illegal activities. So what's easier, shooting people on the street or rendering my rival gang bankrupt? And if the easiest place to do that isn't to try and enter their den, where they might not even have bookkeepings, but is to enter their poorly secured law firm via cyber, I'm not trying to plant ideas here, but I'm saying I think law has this gorgeous naivety, and we're still clutching on to paper. And even though deep down I feel like paper is probably the last secure thing in the world, and that's only when you've eaten it and defecated and then burnt your feces and then put those ashes in a safe, then I think that information is good. But I think we're very naive about how we do things, and we need to, just as we do with all of the physical aspects of running a law firm, we have insurance, we have regular checks on our air conditioning, the lift gets maintained in the building, really basic stuff. If we're not doing that for our computer systems, we are ready for the taking. What are those risks? And there's so much information out there about this that can help. Like, this isn't just, I'm not just posing doom and gloom. But you have to access it. Like, you need someone in each law firm to just say, oh, well, you know, just as we're looking at our occupational health and safety and we're getting someone in to massage people once a month or whatever their thing is, or we're giving them free fruit because we make them work 14-hour days, what are we doing for our IT? Are we outsourcing it regularly? Are we getting any kind of audit done? How do we know it's secure? Who's even testing our firewalls? And that's all in the context of there's no perfect. There's any more than you give me the right thieves, I can enter any building and take what I want. You give me the right cyber guys and I can take any information I want. It's like the pool of monkeys typing Shakespeare. Just give me enough time and enough resources. Everything on every computer, even if it's not on the internet, is vulnerable.
How sophisticated are these guys?
Extremely.
Okay.
Extremely.
Give us an example.
It's got to be their level of interest. Okay, it's their level of interest. So, for example, you've heard of the dark web, ?
Yes.
Okay, good. So out there, nothing can be enforced, right? Because it's other. It's already, by entering the dark web, you're already other. So any contract or agreement or anything you enter into in that area can't be enforced. You can't go to the police. So you're already in other. Out there, you can buy whatever you want. Human limbs, children, small sex operations, like whatever you can conceive is available. So human ingenuity is that if you can even conceive it, it's there. It's already happened. And then back in the real world, back in the clean world, what else? Why are they ingenious? You can be good at it. I used to love rollerblading 20k 3 times a week because I was good at it. I enjoyed it, you know. So if I enjoy doing coding or I enjoy cracking codes, I might just do it for fun. And then if I can sell these, for example, that idea I gave you for a wedge in a back door, if I can sell those for $20 each and I can do 10 a day, and I can sit at home in my PJs and game for the rest of the day.
It's a career, almost.
So I don't know if you heard, there was a very famous case of an excellent hacker who stopped Google, for example. He did a lot more than that, but he got turned, as in he became a good guy. So he started working for the FBI, and I think he's even been in Australia giving lectures. So the best good guys have got their skills being creative out there. You might say, like, maybe the safest car driver has broken every law so that he's now safe. So for the internet, if we want someone who's really skilled, it's hard to imagine a scenario where they haven't done naughty stuff, unless they're actually being raised within the equivalent of the FBI or the AFP or our Defence Signals Directorate, where, you know, in theory, they're all doing the right things, they're training in the right way. But I would say, given how big other countries are with huge amounts of people who are way ahead of Australia in learning this stuff, there's limitless ingenuity.
Where does Australia sit with the rest of the world?
So you remember how I said I felt like the law profession was kind of cute and naive? Australia is, I think, right now at a turning point. We're behind. We're behind. However, given our population, we're doing well. We kind of punch above our weight. Being in the Pentagon and looking at their military cyber capabilities was mind-blowing. But we're doing well. We're doing well over here. And in terms of cyber industry, we're importing. So we don't produce enough. Any of the realms that cyber's useful. So we don't produce enough programmers. We don't produce enough IT people. We don't produce enough cyber assessors. We're not there yet. And so for good cybersecurity, we'll often, you know, get someone from America, or we'll have to import. So I think our room for growth, and I really think that the government here in Victoria has got their eye focused on it, is making us a hub. Because, you know, what is Melbourne's industry? What's going to keep us going as the fastest growing city, all this sort of stuff. And that's a really neat industry. It doesn't have kind of fumes. It's, it's clever industry, which suits the clever country image. So I think if we can get our heads around it and get the universities invested and get the businesses invested and get law invested. Hello, law firms. Two things here, opportunity, risk. So the risk stuff, you just have to get on with that. And if you haven't, I've got a whole list of websites I can hand over to you. We need to do that. Opportunity. So, cyber crime. I have had my intellectual property stolen. I had designed a great jet engine, and it had uses in military and civil aviation, and it's awesome. And it took 1,000 monkeys and 1,000 humans 1,000 years, and I've finally designed it. And it gets taken from my computer. Someone's hacked in and it's gone. I have two options. I can report it as a crime, as a cybercrime to the police, which is the appropriate avenue. But a lot of people will think lawyer. Which law firm in Melbourne would you call for that?
I was about to ask who's doing it well. I'm not sure.
Me either.
You.
That's right, call me. My number is Ask Gatehouse. I think we're missing that boat. And even America is behind there. And I'm not trying to make us lawyers, second oldest profession, seem even more prostitute-y here, but I think that's a very dignified pursuit in terms of, we do have a bad reputation. Here is a win-win. As law firms, you already look after, so many law firms have all of the wills and estate law. Are they covering off on your cyber identity when they're devising an instrument? What happens? Are you going to give your cyber identity to your child, to your spouse, or is it going to end with you? Because Yahoo and Google and all these places already have their own rules about it. Are you even aware of it? How would you advise a client? Client comes in, and we know from Ashley Madison et al., plenty of our clients have things that are secret. And they tell their lawyers these secrets. So client comes in and says, well, I need to do a will. However, I have 3 partners who have my children. I have this, I have that, it's complex. And in the meantime, I was running some stuff in the dark web. How are we going to advise that client? Can we advise that client? Is it ethical to advise that client? And even if it's a straight, normal, spousal will, oh yeah, I really want to make sure that you don't allow them to know about my cyber identity.
Okay.
Because I had a bisexual life during the marriage that I don't want them to know about. I mean, there's a lot of elements, and it's lawyers people trust. It's lawyers. I would want to go into a law firm and know that they even understand this area of law, because we should. This is not new stuff. People have had, Google Mail and Hotmail accounts for a long time now. It's something to think about at death, and lawyers handle that. So I think we've just got to understand this is opportunity. So much opportunity for lawyers.
Is there anyone that you think will be able to do it well, or is it you haven't seen anyone that's going down that path?
So, well, I did do some quick searches because I've only really been living in Melbourne since 2016. And nothing much springs to mind. There are firms that we've known for estate planning. Some of those people may have it, but I'd have to go and ask them. And as for cybercrime, good criminal lawyers may have no idea about how to rigorously assess, for example, the Telecommunications Act, the Telecommunications Interception Act, the Privacy Act. It's more than just a simple trespass where someone's come across my threshold to take physical files. So at what point, when they made an incursion into my system to take electronic files, do I have the equivalent for trespass? Do I have any criminal recourse, or am I better off just going to the IP lawyer and saying my intellectual property has been stolen? Fix, prove it, fix it.
Can they fix it though? The IP lawyer?
They can prove it's occurred. They can prove it's being used, and then we can go into damages. Yeah. That's what lawyers should do. Yeah, absolutely. Make it all right. But I tell you what, if you've got a really amazing piece, like an engine that's so unique, and then you see it being made in another country, that's going to hurt. It's that, you know, the horse is bolted. So the other, I think, opportunity for law firms is to give advice to businesses as to how to best secure themselves. It doesn't mean lawyers are now cybersecurity experts, but it means they can say, well, nothing's perfect, but if you know one of your particular pieces of IP is so much more valuable than others, that might be where you want to invest a lot into what you do to secure it. The rest of the stuff, the pay slips and the people data and just all your other clients, maybe you have a different level of security for. It doesn't cost so much to maintain. There's a perception as well that I think small and medium-sized businesses and law firms are more vulnerable because they don't have maybe the money, the purchasing power to buy, for example, in-house IT. The Emma take on that is actually different. I think the larger law firms have so many more points of vulnerability that it evens out. So yeah, a small law firm might not have put its mind to the fact that it does need to do its own audits. It needs to do more than just buy an off-the-shelf package and put it in the 90s and think that that's still going to be okay. Like we need to do. It's like an annual health check. We need to do that for our cyber. Whereas if you have a large law firm, the biggest point of vulnerability of every system is the human. You've just won $1,000. Open here to collect your Coles online voucher. Do you know how many otherwise intelligent, well-educated and quite bright individuals click the button?
No.
And there was one case I read, I think it was happening in Queensland recently, like this year, where it was emails going to the law firm saying, I need advice on this, and then the law firm would engage thinking it was a real person. It was a sort of bot really, and not a real person. And then the bot would come back saying, oh, well, you know, can you read these attachments so that you give me an idea of a quote for what you would cost? Of course, the lawyer's going to open the attachment. So, you know, I actually think the hugest vulnerability is people. Mm-hmm. No one enjoys IT training. You give it an automatic 30-minute thing where they're clicking the button, they're going to be listening to music. They're going to be working on another case. Like, how do you actually make people vested in your firm's security? You make it about them. Yeah. Because everything you should be learning about keeping your firm secure applies to you. A lot of lawyers are parents. It applies to their very vulnerable children. Mm-hmm. Remembering that not until the age of 25 do you have a developed frontal lobe cortex that assesses risk properly. So these young children on devices can't even assess risk of predators, of anything to do with mummy and daddy's credit card. So I think for law firms, you really need to, like, I think, forget this thing about big firms are safer. Big firms have so many more points of risk. A small firm, you know, usually they know each other, they're invested, and then it's just having a regular checkup, a regular risk assessment.
What are some of the things that they should be doing, from training to implementing? What should firms, even companies and individuals, should be doing?
Yeah, and I'd like to think that in the law firms doing this for themselves, they'll then turn around and give that advice to the businesses who are their clients. Mm-hmm. Almost as a kind of, oh, here's a free, you know, fact sheet from whatever, Gatehouse Legal, from where your firm is. Here's our free fact sheet, by the way, on your cyber annual health check, and we'll do this free for you. And then, you know, you can make recommendations. But so at the very least, your people And I think, there are free websites that can teach you basics, but it's like any business, you have to insure against risk. So we insure against fire and flood. Have we insured against cyber theft? Especially as law firms, but every other business, whether it's a car repair shop or whatever they're designing, they're collecting data. So once you're collecting data on personal information, as we know, we're straight into privacy, and we're straight into, if not international privacy because we're an international company or firm, then internal, domestic, the Australian privacy principles apply. So that's just basic Excel spreadsheets with people's names and numbers and things. So we owe that duty of care. There's so many things I'd want a law firm to think about and another business. Are we discharging our basic duty of care for the data we collect? Do we need to collect it in the first place? Because everything you collect becomes your burden. Mm-hmm. How long you keep it, how you store it, and how safe it is, that's your burden. I don't know if you got I think I've brought a copy of it. Goes off camera. Brings out appropriately cutted black cyber lawyers folder. Right. Victorian Legal Admission Board. Data breach sent me a email, and probably you and probably a whole heap of us, on the 26th of September at 2:49 p.m. Notification of data breach. So this is them being good guys and doing the right thing. Writing to you as a registered user of VLab online, blah, 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 to inform you of a data breach regarding access to personal information. So, not just do you have to worry about what you collect and why you collect it, once you're aware of a breach, this initiates a whole host of things that you must do. Mm. And that's whether or not it's on a computer, that's even if it's old-fashioned hard copy paper files. So, for example, if I were listening to any part of me and I was still awake, if I didn't know about either the Australian privacy principles, my duty to notify breaches, if these things aren't known to me, you now know there's a lot you don't know, mm-hmm. and you need to seek help. The help's there. This folder is what the Law Institute of Victoria, cyber security essentials for law firms. It exists, but part of the problem is you don't know what you don't know.
Correct.
So I suppose, yes, and this is my thing about tying the nub in for, if you're a law firm, really how am I going to get my solicitors, my paralegals, my legal secretaries? It's a sort of, what's the so what factor for them? Mm-hmm. Whatever, it's work and you didn't give me my pay rise. Because it applies to you. The stuff you're going to learn for work is going to apply for you. So yes, Liv also brought out cybersecurity essentials for the individual. So there's lots of stuff out there. There's Australian government stuff. There's really good Victorian government stuff. I think I wrote a couple of notes for myself about, give me a sec.
That's all right.
A lot of notes about what would be the minimum I should think about if I'm a law firm. So, have you heard of the Ashley Madison?
I haven't, no.
Okay. So Ashley Madison was one of the websites that was owned by a company which was specifically a dating site for affairs, for people who want to have affairs.
Yes, I've heard this.
You've heard it? In fact, I think the ABC drama called, or it might be a British drama called The Split on iView, is based on this. So, and the lawyer in that drama is married to a barrister whose name was on the list. Drama. So
Australian loves it.
I know. It was quite a good series. So here is a business that has numerous websites involving a darker side of human nature. Now, affairs happen all the time anyway. This isn't cyber specific, but it was a firm that enabled people to make those connections,
That's another discussion, I suppose.
I'm blowing your mind, darling Louise, I'm sorry. So this exists, it's their business, and actually when you went into their website, they've got that sort of, SSL security certificate, blah, blah, blah guarantee. So people think, oh, that's good. My wife won't find out, my husband won't find out. I'll whack this in, and when I'm on conference in Adelaide, I'll be able to hook up and it'll all be fine. And that's great, and that's been going for years, and that's wonderful, and they put in their credit cards and whatnot and get their little, unique identifier. Well, guess what? It got hacked. And they were told if they didn't close down, I think it was actually some righteous type of people, if you don't close down, they went after money, if you don't close down these websites, we're going to release names. And they didn't close down the websites, and the names were released. So there was a huge investigation this is about 2015, huge investigation, and what that leads to, and this is in Australia, but it's an international company, so there's some that international law stuff as well for the cyber, which of course gets me very excited. Very briefly, the findings of the report included important lessons for other organisations, so I'm going to put everything we can think of, law firms in particular, because the data we hold, not just criminal lawyers, family lawyers, every part of the law, property law, everything we do is just as private, if not as sexual, as the Ashley Madison stuff. Okay. The most broadly applicable lesson is that it is crucial for organisations that hold personal information electronically to adopt clear and appropriate processes, procedures and systems to handle information security risks that is supported by adequate expertise, internal or external. So that was one I wanted to really obviously drill down, because I'd written it down. And then, okay, I think the third, and I'm trying to keep them as succinct as possible because otherwise people will freak out, is along the lines of me saying you do need insurance for cybersecurity. You need to have that as backup, because when your clients go after you, you're going to not have enough money to pay that out, especially if you're an intellectual property lawyer. What is your plan? So Ashley Madison as well came up with, well, what was your plan? It's not if. It's not if. You are going to be hacked. And if you've got, if you've got a business and you think, oh, this is so great, we've never been hacked, nothing's ever come up on our security system, definitely do a review.
Okay.
Definitely do a review. Even the government is coming out with, and the federal government gives regular reports, and it says in the last 12 months there's been 50% more attacks on Australian businesses. It doesn't specifically say law firms, but we're businesses, aren't we? Isn't that what law's about? So it is going to happen. If it hasn't happened, you're either exceptionally lucky or you have no idea, which means your system needs auditing, which you should be doing regularly anyway. Just like, I don't know, people get checked for cancers.
Yeah.
You need to do this regularly. And if you haven't, and things go really bad and it ends up in court, that's the sort of stuff they're going to say. They're going to say, well, you've known since 2015 at least, these were the things that came out of that report into Ashley Madison. Should apply to all businesses. So once you know I'm going to be attacked, what was your next thing? It is too late to be trying to learn what are the numbers of IT fixes in Melbourne after it's happened. You need a risk plan. And I think, your, I suppose, damage control and everything should be part of a broader risk management, which again comes down to what are my critical vulnerabilities, what's my most critical data, and how much do I need to go into this? How big is my law firm? What are my risks? Do you risk assessments regularly? There are all sorts of websites. There's an international standard on risk management. There's an international standard on cybersecurity. There's Australian tools. It's all there. You need to know that you need to do it. And so, yes, I think the third point that I'm driving home is have a plan and know that you can execute it. The plan can't be employ someone down the track that knows this. It should be, you, at the moment, I would like to think that anyone listening to this is having a slight sphincter moment going, I don't even have a plan. I've never been attacked, but I probably don't have a system that would know. Yeah. And use that adrenaline, use that sphincter moment to go and find out. And if you don't know, I guess ring Gatehouse.
Yeah.
And
we can refer them to you.
Come to me. Please come to me. No, it's not all doom and gloom. It's just, I don't take my car onto the road without knowing where I'm going and without comprehensive third-party insurance. Why would I run a business without having cyber insurance and a plan for when I get hacked? Because I'm going to be hacked. I'm going to be hacked.
How safe is the cloud? Like, everyone's putting everything onto the cloud.
We are now.
Photos to data, and they're moving away from, I suppose, data hosted on internal servers to the cloud. Is it safe? Is it not safe? Is there any difference?
Right. So I suppose part of the problem with an old school mentality is, so if you're looking at someone in my generation who is a child of the 60s, we used to think that privacy was really important, you know, and that I could have secret information or even private information, my medical data, my, you know, dating history, anything like that might be private. People who've been born, you know, since the late 90s actually approach it differently. They think about it differently. They're not so private. They know that when they're posting their, you know, topless pics or their dick pics, that it could get shared. Like, okay, we don't have the frontal lobe thing till 25, but there's less of a care factor. Yeah. So I'm thinking as we develop into cyber, because we're not turning back now, we're going further into this, we're going to change our priorities. We're going to say, look, it's all vulnerable. What's my risk? What really matters to me? And frankly, if it really matters to you that you've got a mole on your penis and you don't want anyone to see it, ultimately just resist the temptation. Don't take the photo. Definitely don't put it on the cloud. But I equally would say don't put it in your hard data storage, because in terms of vulnerability, they're both vulnerable. What I prefer about the cloud is you can't set fire to it. Okay. Because even if you destroy a couple of servers in a couple of countries, like it's going to keep going, because it's everywhere, if you like. It's that beautiful, you know, ether. Mm-hmm. Whereas what I have never been terribly fond of with in-house server rooms is their own physical vulnerability. And this is the other thing, and it takes away a bit of the allure of cyber, but I'm going to do it. We worry about the attacks, for example, on gas and electricity, and forget that any given day that I feel like it, I can pop a bit of whatever I want, some kind of explosive, into my backpack, lob myself over the side of a not very secure fence into any of our electricity plants in Australia or overseas, and just physically attack it. So let's not forget the basics in criminal activity. Yes, you can do it with cyber, but we're still very vulnerable physically. So for me, a hard server in a building, water damage, overheating, nasty element, person going in with a screwdriver, fire, there's vulnerabilities anyway. Mm-hmm. Do I think it's more hackable in the cloud? Not really. So same. If something's plugged in, it's plugged in, and I can get it. I'll get that. Give me my monkeys, my typewriters, my Shakespeare. Okay, that's rude. Rude to cyber people, you're not monkeys. Give me the right people. Yeah. Give me some lead time, whatever you want. Same with a house. People have the best security systems. I'll come in through your roof. Nothing's invulnerable. So maybe we just change our attitude. Yes, there are some things that are extremely valuable. From a governmental perspective, if every business in Australia got seriously attacked right now by a foreign entity, at some point it would be serious enough that it would affect our ability to function as a state. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I think we could actually look at a military version of response. So collective security is the best, and it's really basic stuff. It's understanding, it's training, and accepting, I think, a level of vulnerability. I mean, we all take risks. We get into cars, we jump on trams. We all take risks, and there's an international standard on risk assessment if you really don't know how to assess for your own business, and there are experts. Yeah. I hope that's helpful.
It is very helpful. I wanted to go back to the black web. Was that right?
Dark web.
Dark web.
But we do have black hatters. There's black, grey and white hatters, so you're not too far off. But yeah, it's the dark web.
The dark web.
Yeah.
All right, we'll come back to the hatters. Tell us about the dark web, because I've heard the phrase before, but I don't know too much detail, and I'm sure other people haven't heard of it or know anything about it. So please share.
Okay, so I think if we just go back to basic human motives, usually we're motivated by a couple of things: power, money, sometimes fame. So the black web's not for fame, although it can help you get it. The black web is about money and power, and so where in the past, for example, a criminal element might have made its money from street deals and maybe drug deals or something like that. There's more sophisticated ways now. If I need to access a cache of automatic rifles in Australia, I'll go to the dark web. If I know that it's not quite legal for me to have a party with 11-year-olds who can't consent to sexual activities, I'll go to the dark web. And we've had high-profile footballers and people like that who've been caught, not through the dark web, but actually just through basic email invitations, going to those sorts of parties with underage children. And I think part of it is this immorality thing about what goes on in there. There are also really basic things, like you just want to get a kilo of heroin, or you need some things done. The problem with entering it when you don't know enough about it is don't think it's invisible just because it's the black web. It's dark web. You're being monitored, and it might not be like a friendly police organisation. The minute you're in there, you're vulnerable to blackmail.
How do you get in there? What is it? Is it a site? Is it like what is it?
Google. Just Google it.
Okay.
But be aware that there are some things that you Google or use on other search sites which are traceable. Okay. So I think what I'd ask first is, in the same way as, are you heading down Victoria Street because you want some ice or heroin? There are cameras on the street now. If you're heading into the black web out of curiosity, it might be better just to do, I'm curious about the black, like I'm calling it black web now.
Sorry.
We've created a new term, I love it. It's the Louise BW.
So if you Google black web, you're not going to find anything. Search dark web.
We'll start a new one. Okay.
All right.
It'll be the Gatehouse one. Like I'm curious about the dark web would be a good, safe search, as opposed to looking for murderers in, or you know what I mean. So there's certainly information out there. I think there's a couple of books on it, but
maybe buy a book if you want to know more.
The whole thing is, if in the law context someone's approached you because they were brokering something in the dark web, something fairly legit like Bitcoin, and it's gone wrong, they're on the other side. The law will be very difficult to enforce over there.
Okay. And what about these hatters?
So
different hats.
The mad hatters. So technically someone who hacks is called a black hatter. Okay. And they're black because they're doing it illegally. And really to cut your teeth out there, once you've done the basic legal stuff, and there's wonderful sites for children and everything on what to learn, to challenge themselves, they're gonna go illegal, and it might not be harmful. It might be, hey Dad, did you know I've just been able to access your emails, and why did you not give me a better birthday present, or whatever. Right up to, I've now hacked into Department of Defence. What do I think I'm going to do with this? Shall I sell it? Shall I tell them? Shall I whatever? The grey hatters do a bit of both.
Okay.
So they might work as a contractor for whoever, Department of Defence, whatever, work all day fixing the IT in this building, you know. But then at night, they get a little challenge. And your white hat is someone who has probably signed a bunch of papers, Secrecy Act and security and whatever, and they've come over to the police, Victoria Police, State Police, Federal Police, Defence, ASIO, whoever, one of our organisations that we like to think has us covered, and they're doing good guy stuff. They may still be hacking, but they're hacking for a reason. They're hacking into criminal elements, or they're hacking to test the safety.
Okay. What else do we need to know about cyber? If there's something else that you wanted to communicate about cyber,
Let me just check my notes.
crime and attacks. Actually, when does it become, referring back to the military,
Yep.
an attack?
Oh, right, okay.
Because
So,
I know you distinguish between
yeah,
crime
attack
and attack.
yes, thank
So
you, my bugbear.
What's an example of an attack?
Okay, so for it to be a sufficient attack to allow a state, a country, to respond with force, it needs to it needs to be almost the equivalent of someone throwing missiles in, essentially.
Okay.
So we're not talking about, for example, Commonwealth Bank data getting stolen, or even Medicare data being compromised. And I think it was Obama when, I'm not going to remember the company, but one of the major companies there was hacked. And he went, this is when he was still president, went public to say, this is, mere cyber harassment, or I think he used something like that. He said, this isn't attack. So he understood, at that politician's level, it's a whole lot more serious. If a person is attacking a country, and I hinted, I suppose, at that, I think there is some point at which, if it were even only just businesses being attacked, but it now gets to a point where the functioning of a country is at risk, that would be enough. So let's say there's country X, and they've all focused all their excellent skills into just stopping the stock exchange here, stopping our 10 biggest companies from functioning, and as well as the Reserve Bank. So things just kind of stop for us. We need to react. Mm-hmm. Now, what are the tools open in warfare to Australia? We could bomb, we can shoot, we can send missiles, and we can respond with a cyber attack.
Okay.
And by that I mean an attack. A nasty one that could cause loss of life, could cause danger. So it's a very high amount to enter into warfare. And, I think I might have said before we were recording, it's a political decision. It's not up to an individual company. And I remember being on one of the cyber speaking engagements in the States and being rigorously, questioned by a company that said, we're going to attack back. We're going to attack back. And I understand, if a thief came into my home, I'd feel all the things that you feel when someone's stolen something from you, vulnerable, you feel attacked. But that doesn't give you any right to go and commit a crime. So hacking back is a crime. I can't stop people committing crimes, but if someone were coming to see me as their lawyer or whatever and saying, I just want to hack back because I lost my aircraft engine that took me 10 years to develop, I'd have to say, well, I can't counsel you to commit a crime. That's a crime. So there's this notion that you can hack back. No. If someone's physically attacking you, you can use reasonable force to defend yourself. Cyber, how were you being in any way physically put into danger? And if you were, then your response needs to be proportionate. Yeah.
Okay. Now coming back to my last question when I interrupt you with another question.
No.
What's one other thing people should know about, I suppose, cyber and crime?
Yes. Okay. So I think I had purpose and vulnerability I've written down. So I think your business purpose. So let's say we're a law firm, let's say we specialise in family law, just start with a risk assessment. Why did you go and get, insurance for the building or the contents? Well, because everyone does. And we need to, I think, get into a mentality where cyber, well, everyone does. Are you going to have a computer in your law firm? Then this is your business. So what are the things that make a family law firm particularly vulnerable? Well, it's a very volatile area of law to begin with. So I think there is actual physical danger for people in that profession. And then let's see if you can have people emotionally disturbed enough to blow up and kill judges, why wouldn't they go and find someone that could hurt the firm, hurt the solicitor through what they assume will be an untraceable cyber means? So I think it's an individual test, your vulnerability. Yeah.
There you have it. That is the end of this episode on cyber law. Don't forget to subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel, and you can explore the wonderful world of the legal profession.